I will now describe what happens when persons assume that they are isolated in fantasizing about sexual romantic love about person described in prior videos, each separated one usually, or when that collides and creates parallel possible relationships, and how to again order that in rivals and maidens, potential ones, to pursue. I've explained in the other video. Common fear that led to mental health institutions, prisons, and also false alerts is lack of recognition that there is reciprocity and need to use all of possible skills, each man and each woman, to make declaration of own infatuation in love and such sexual interest understood to the other person. And now listen to me carefully. Based on mind contents, instances of actual living as pleasurable reciprocal relationship, meaning even if person is unknown or somewhere else or acts in ways that are difficult to predict, mind content has pleasurable, fulfilling, loving reciprocal feedback in which person may experience as if speaking to that loved person in own mind, being alone, or person doing something else in romantic, intimate way, and perceives the lovemaking source of own eroticism that is expressed in masturbation and in pursuit of remediation, looking for look-alike persons, or in profound love, in incapacity to look for someone else because that person creates dissatisfaction with all of even sexiest and most famous persons, all of authorities most respected and looked up to, in comparison to how that person is loved and admired as source of desire and sexual pleasure. And that mind content, so instance in successful in mind love making to a specific person, if different person we don't want, mark that this is a person worthy to use all of the talents in own goodness, all of the connections, all of the expressiveness to declare such love and such desire in hopes of reciprocity. And when it is a woman, to declare such as feasibility, not guarantee, that this in person, if that man would intend and pursue and place such woman as priority as opposed to all others, he would be met with the same degree of love and reciprocity in sexual desire corresponding to bodily impressions and emotions of that female, as well as then provision of all of the goods and luxuries for that person, often accompanied also by pursuit of safety and well-being of that person before everybody else. Reciprocity of such is key to determine if that person is number one to bet on or it is someone else. When we live such as fantasy in own mind, we stop realizing self as self, and we intend to have in self a source of self impressions and memories of what are likes and loves of own since birth, that are intrinsic to how we are in goodness, such as taste to food, taste and preferences to beverages, to luxuries, remembered activities and pursuits. I designed that as self-help tool and called it who, what, and how. And it is meant to, in absence of real life reciprocal fulfilling relationship, to sustain own independence and sense of self, and when there's a confusion as to who self truly prefers and loves most in reciprocity, because of self being mixed up with other, if a woman, men, including family members, and in search of characteristics of also other females in self, in fear of that man seeking another female in self because of similarities to that female. Therefore, that is a personal motivation to make love declarations, songs, and all art. If especially famous and person is in somewhere far away and he needs to hear about it and know about it to decide on own state of mind and actions and decide on pursuit, that it is needed to risk betting based on described prior mind content on one person in such love declaration, and then hope that that information will arrive to that person as such, and that person, if that is a man, will pursue, and then contrast that with reality in a real-time dynamic in physical world, in degree of alignment with mind content of that relationship for success for a lifelong relationship as preferred. We therefore do not lie about sexual impressions because to flatter, because that prejudices that relationship. We also try to not to expect as flattery faking and lying about the other person's impression or sexual pursuits such as touching, etc. Because when we do, that person may believe in being sexually desired when in mind content there is someone who is more desired impeding such a relationship. We also do not assume such as a lie and hope for veracity of such, because basic instinct-based relationships are very difficult in person in lovemaking to forge, and we set up pursuit of intercourse to have a child in emotional pleasure, ecstasy, and sexual orgasmic bliss, mutual one, as ideal or maximum, in comparison to which persons, other persons, become other or shifted to other types of relationships as less loved. Now, rejection in person, so lack of mind content that implies in mind that that person may be living, and it may be a precognition, the same degree of infatuation and lovemaking in own mind, is one necessary aspect to motivate declaration. Then when that declaration of love or possibility of that person of be accepted needs to be accepted as hope for real life relationship, not something to impede, because in real life together that couple actually may meet an obstacle in one of the components of that relationship, and combined as a relationship one and another declare that as mutual rejection and change that relationship to another type, such as friendship, such as working relationship, such as for instance strangemanship also, so being, I don't know, neighbors or being known persons, in no resentment when it is marked, for instance, we love one another, however we really feel something is impeding ascension to orgasm together and pleasure when child is concerned, when pregnancy is possible. So for instance, on ovulation day, man has a reflex to use a condom, a woman wants to have contraceptives, hides, for instance, that man from others, or man hides that woman from the other, seeks for reasons to reject, to promote someone else's presence from work or from other spaces. And it means there is something in that relationship that, in disregard to existence of all others, marks that relationship together is not preferred, contrasted with other asexual types of relationships, or relationships who are more serious. And from there strives morality, or morality in unlawful, marking as unlawful, intensity of sex in pleasure that is less, that enables presence in mind or in person, more than one person um, for each of us as a source of pleasure, or other species or devices, or some sort of fantasies based on the what, not on a person. And so that is to remember now, and I will describe what is prelude to pursuit in person of such as physical contact, and can go wrong and become sole source of sexual pleasure and self-esteem as fantasy, while the other person is sought for annihilation because of equivocal belief that it is possible to find fulfillment without being loved and desired back, cause orgasm and have child. That is not possible, and hence serial killing occurs. Or intends on suicide when person pursues a person who rejects despite those rejections, and that person actually is unable to give chance to others to have the maximum for self in being loved and being adored and being desired, and feeling the exact intensity of adoration and the exact necessary for a sexual act, intensity and obstacle-free ascension in sexual arousal not lied about, while in the other one that occurs to have on ovulation sex, to have child, in fact in some as soon as possible. In person, when meeting persons, we decide each of us on such based on difficulty in refraining from intercourse to have a child as urge, and such in reciprocity as delightful and difficult to control for that female as well. And so that is when the person is met from the first instant, that we evaluate who it is in person that is likeliest to become a father material for a female and her children, in greatest likelihood of fidelity because of successful repetitive then sexual activity, and wanted one and source of protection, because fidelity is based on rejection of all others as being less enjoyable sexually and less wanted and loved, based on reciprocity, and it is mutual. So that is again prelude, that's what I'm gonna describe, to in-person relationship. And if there is rejection of such happening, or impediment that is impossible to remedy because there is someone who loves or desires more for two, then that becomes just mind, even if it's shared and another person is pursued. But two components need to be presented, and we often think that we can touch through or have sex through the obstacles, creating attachment because there was some contact. It is false. If in mind there is someone the person fantasizes, not corroborated in reality with reciprocity, so presence of the same fantasy, and as a serious relationship in person, in pursuit, in reciprocity, then that we create a relationship that has limitation in that other non-pursuit relationship, doubtful relationship, and it has to be corroborated, because otherwise it is an obstacle also in church to have lasting marriage, an obstacle to having children,